You've got a couple of computers, maybe a Mac computer and a Windows, or maybe you've got a computer and a tablet. Obviously, you only want to have one keyboard on your desk. So here are a couple of Bluetooth wireless mechanical keyboards that allow you to pair up to 3 devices that you can then switch between pretty seamlessly. The Keychron K2 version 2 and the Logitech MX Mechanical. These keyboards can solve a couple of different potential issues. Like I mentioned in the intro, you can pair up to 3 devices with them, so you don't need to clunk up your desk with multiple keyboards, which would be silly. Maybe you're a more reasonable person and you only have one device, but you don't want wires. These keyboards would be an ideal solution for either of those scenarios. I did purchase both of these keyboards with my own money. I'm not affiliated with either company. I've had the Keychron for probably 2 years now. And then I got the MX Mechanical in the summer of 2022. The Keychron K2 version 2 is a 75% keyboard, and the version of the MX Mechanical that I have is the full size or the 100% version, but there is a MX Mechanical Mini, which is essentially a 75% version as well. Keychron also has other keyboards besides the K2, so they've got full-size keyboards, they've got even smaller form factor keyboards, so tons of options on Keychron if you don't like 75%. The MX Mechanical is a low-profile mechanical keyboard, so you can tell that it's a little bit slimmer overall than this full-size Keychron K2, but Keychron also has a slim keyboard. It's called the K3. Both keyboards are compatible with Windows, Android, macOS, and iOS. The Keychron has a physical switch, so it goes from Windows and Android to Mac iOS. The MX Mechanical doesn't have any switches to toggle between the different operating systems. It does have the different functions printed onto the key. So for instance, the Alt key in Windows doubles as the Command key in macOS. Keychron, on the other hand, it comes with extra keycaps. So it has Mac keycaps. So I've got the Command key, the Option key, and it also comes with Windows keycaps. So you'll have to switch between the different keys if you want to have them customized to the different operating system. Both keyboards operate over Bluetooth, obviously, but the MX Mechanical also has the bolt receiver. It comes with the bolt receiver. So if you have an older device that doesn't have Bluetooth or doesn't have a good Bluetooth module or something, then you can use this instead. And you can pair multiple Logitech devices to this receiver as well. The Keychron is Bluetooth only, but one other difference between these two is the Keychron can be run as a wired keyboard. So if you plug in the charging cable to your computer will recognize it as a just regular wired keyboard, whereas the MX Mechanical, if you plug in the charging cable to your computer, it does not recognize it as a wired keyboard. So the MX Mechanical is wireless only, whether that's Bluetooth or with the bolt receiver. The Keychron is a very analog experience, meaning there's no software to pair with this, so all the functions are enabled or disabled with key presses on the keyboard. Some things might be a little bit more complicated and would require you to look up how to enable or disable certain functions. The Logitech has the Logi Plus Options software that you can download, which will allow you to do a lot of customization of the keyboard. I'll leave it up to you to decide which user experience is preferable. I will say, on the one hand, it's nice to not need to download and activate a piece of software to unlock all the full functionality of your device. On the other hand, it's also nice to not need to pull up a manual to figure out how to make certain changes. The Keychron has a 4,000 milliamp hour battery, which is rated to last up to 240 hours of typing without the backlight. 240 hours translates to about 10 days. The Logitech has a 1,500 milliamp hour battery, which is rated to last up to 10 months of typing. 10 months of use, it doesn't say typing, without the backlight, or 15 days with the backlight enabled. Speaking of the backlight, you have full manual control over the backlight on the Keychron. There's versions with white backlight or RGB. The Logitech has white backlight only. You can disable the backlight altogether in the software, but it also has this motion sensing or proximity sensing feature where, as you saw there, the backlight turned off when I moved my hand away, and it's supposed to come back on when it senses your hand, but as you can see here, it doesn't always work, and it takes you actually pressing a key for it to turn back on. So I find that functionality a little bit annoying. I touched on the low profile nature of the MX Mechanical versus the Keychron, and another potential negative that I'll mention with the Keychron is not only is it a full-size keyboard, so it's taller than the low profile, but it also is kind of a tall keyboard in comparison to other full-size mechanical keyboards. Depending on how you type, if you rest your hands or wrists on the surface, there is more angle and more stress potentially put on your wrists with this keyboard. Whereas with the MX Mechanical, given that it's much flatter and lower profile, obviously, there's much less angle and stress put on your wrists. Before we get into the typing comparison, I neglected to mention the types of switches that are available on each. The Keychron has Gateron Pro switches. You can select between browns, blues, and reds. As you can see here, I've got the brown switches. As for the Logitech, they don't advertise the type of switches or the manufacturer, but I think they're Kale switches, and they call them linear, clicky, and tactile quiet. These are the tactile quiet. So you can think of them as brown switches. The clicky would be like blue switches, and the linear are kind of like a red switch. Not kind of like, they are like a red switch. Let's go ahead and take a listen to how these keyboards sound. As we listen to the comparison, I'm gonna do 10 iterations of Type Racer on each keyboard, and then tally up how accurate I was on each keyboard. It's obviously not a complete, thorough data set, but it's something that we can compare at least how accurate I was with both keyboards. I have noticed recently, especially with DaVinci Resolve, which is what I use to edit my videos, that the Keychron will just disconnect every couple minutes for some reason. So I don't know if that's an issue with the keyboard or with Resolve and Bluetooth, or just maybe a Bluetooth problem in general. The keycaps on the Keychron are also not great, so they don't have a lot of texture to them. They're really slick, and you'll find that they discolor and pick up the oils from your fingers. So let's talk about the negatives with the Logitech. The keys on the Logitech, like the Keychron, aren't that great. So they have very slick texture to them, very similar to the Keychron. And given that they're low profile, they also have a little bit less contour to them than the full-size keys on the Keychron. One other problem with the keycaps on the Logitech is, so they're all standard. So you could get a replacement set of keycaps and replace every key on here except the spacebar. The spacing on the stems of the spacebar is slightly different. These two outer stems are inset just a couple millimeters in comparison with the standard spacing. The last negative with the MX Mechanical is its price. In my opinion, it's a little bit overpriced. There's a lot of functionality in here, a lot of really nice functionality. The full-size version is about $180, I believe, and the mini version is $150. The Keychron start at like 60 or 70 bucks. Even the full-size version you can get for under $100, and they have the same functionality essentially. I like all the functionality that it has, but I don't feel like it is a premium keyboard. What have we learned and how have we improved as people? Each obviously has distinct pluses and minuses, and I'm not really gonna pick a winner. I just hope that I've given you enough data and enough opinion essentially to make a decision on your own. I do feel like in terms of value, the Keychron offers a much better value. They have the same functionality. The Logitech offers a more seamless experience. I feel like it's easier to figure out without needing to get instructions how to pair it with devices, and it also switches between devices a little bit more seamlessly than the Keychron. The Keychron feels just a little bit clunkier. Whether it's worth paying an extra $70 on average, I guess, for that little bit of extra seamlessness is up to you to decide.